As home prices went through the roof in parts of this country, a lot of people blamed a frenzy of foreign buyers. Policymakers even created new rules to try to hold them off. Well, new data show the impact of foreign buyers is actually relatively small. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation and Statistics Canada put their heads together, and here's what they found. Non-residents of Canada own less than 5% of homes in the Greater Toronto and Greater Vancouver areas. And yet, each market has implemented rules to crack down on foreign buyers. For the purposes of this report, a non-resident is a Canadian citizen who no longer lives in the country but still owns real estate, or a non-citizen who owns property in Canada without living in the country as a primary residence. Non-residents owned 3.4% of all residential properties in Toronto and 4.8% in Vancouver. But they own nearly 8% of the condos in the Greater Vancouver area. In Toronto, the figure is slightly lower, but still north of 7%. To talk more about the policy implications that came out of today's reports, we're joined by Cynthia Holmes, Associate Professor at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University. Policy-wise, I mean, we've been beating this drum for a little while on this show, saying we're making policy decisions in absence of data to back those up. What are your concerns?
Well, I think that is definitely possible that these Ontario Fair Housing Plan policies put into place this year were a response to popular opinion with the idea that foreign buyers are speculators that are driving up the prices of homes in Toronto. So the evidence was not strong to support that opinion.
So, I mean, does there need to be a reckoning of that? Do we need, because this is important, and we've seen, you know, it had a brief impact on prices, as Bob was saying, but how much of that was just perception of people thinking, well, I guess there are these foreign buyers, that does tell us this is a thing, now there's these rules, that's going to change, and now we've begun to see it bounce back up because maybe it wasn't there in the first place.
Yeah, I think some of the effect was exactly as you described. If I'm thinking about selling my house and these rules come into place, I say, well, the foreign buyers aren't available to buy my house anymore. Maybe I'll sort of wait and see what's happening with the market before I sell. That depresses supply, and so we see these sort of changes that take place in the marketplace that are driven by psychological belief systems, not, well, that happens all the time in all kinds of markets, right?
For sure it does, but when we're introducing sort of government policy, it should be more than just that. And, you know, I'm not a young man, and I can remember having this debate about foreign buyers when I lived in Vancouver, even when I lived in Toronto in my 20s, about the impact of money flooding in from wherever it may be. Why haven't we just gathered that data? You fill out so many forms when you buy a house. You tick off so many boxes about who you are and what your credit is. Why can't we just, or why haven't we, for all of that time, said, oh yeah, let's add in a box and find out where people are coming from?
I mean, I would love to get that data, and I'm a research economist in real estate, and so I have tried to get that data. We can go to land title offices to get the data, but for broad academic researchers,
it's just not there.
It's just not there. It's not available to us without cost, and even with cost, it's not. So I'm encouraged to see that more money has been put into housing research through the federal plan, and I see CMHC doing some really interesting new surveys. So I'm encouraged, and I hope that some of this data becomes widely available so academics can also get their hands on it.
But here's my concern. If we were making those policy or that policy decision in absence of data, what other policy decisions have we been making in absence of data? I mean,
how many policy decisions are made to respond to popular opinion and for political expediency? That's an excellent question.
And is housing in particular, because it's such an emotional thing and because it is the biggest purchase any of us will ever make, hands down, is it sort of ripe for that, of playing to sort of how we feel about things rather than what we know about things?
I think it is. And also the municipal government intervenes in the market quite a bit through the supply side. And so that's another reason that it's a highly regulated sort of market. It's quite different from the market for toothpaste, where you can respond to demand fluctuations quite easily. In housing, you just can't. It takes a long time to build them and a long time to get permission to build them. So it's a different market, and it's very complicated.
It is funny to me, at least, that I go on Twitter and I see what people are saying about this, and there is a large section of the population that just doesn't believe this. They're like, no, the foreign buyers were a problem. The policy changes helped it, but it isn't even enough yet. How do you offset that? Is it just more data? Is it just more research and more information?
I hope that more research and more facts would persuade some of these people to change their mind, but I think for some people there's a human desire to blame someone else for the problem.
Right.
So even these foreign buyers, it's not that they're necessarily speculators.
Right.
Speculation's what drives up demand, falsely. So
and
I think
know
it's
lots of
probably
people from
domestic.
right here that are doing that.
Exactly. Many of these home buyers, of the 5% we have in Toronto, are here because they just came here to be an executive in a firm and they're not resident, and they bought the house and they paid their taxes. So they're not necessarily speculators.
So game this out for us. If in fact it wasn't the problem that we said it was, and then we introduced these policies and that lowered prices a little bit, it cooled things off at the very least, what does this mean, this new batch of data that says it wasn't the problem we thought it was? What does that mean for prices in the medium term at the very least?
Well, I hope that supply will continue to increase. I think that's really the key. I think Toronto is a world-class city. It's a great place to live, and people are moving here. Tens of thousands every year.
Right.
We need to respond, and by we I mean the municipal government and the real estate development industry has to respond with more units to house these new people. In the absence of these increased supply, this increased demand will just put price pressures on the market.
Smart stuff as always, Cynthia. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
Cynthia Holmes, Associate Professor at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University.